So this week we're going to talk about teenagers, which some of you, it's been a long time since you were a teenager. I won't ask you to count the years in your head. Some of us, it wasn't that long ago. Yes, I said us. Feels like it wasn't that long ago, but I know, again, if you count the years, it is longer than you think. But we're going to talk about navigating the teen years. So there's a lot of younger children represented in this room, a lot of babies, a lot of toddlers. And the teenage years seem like forever away. You might even with the babies be like, oh, it'd be nice if they would just eat on their own and not wake me up in the middle of the night so the teen years could come faster. That would be fine. And I will tell you from experience, and I know you've heard this and everyone says this, time flies. Like it goes by so quick. And before you know it, they will be teenagers. And so not that you will remember everything that is talked about today when they eventually do become teenagers, but these are principles that I think could just apply to us in our lives as well, apply to us in rearing kids, really regardless of what age they are. But there are some specific things with teenagers that don't necessarily apply to toddlers, right, and to even grade school age kids. As I was studying and kind of thinking about teenagers and even thinking about when I was a teenager, I can specifically, and maybe you can have a time like this in your life too, I can specifically look back to like 8th grade and being like, that was like one of my favorite ages ever. So I'd have been like 14, maybe 15, somewhere in there. Like for me, I was 2 years into middle school, so I was finally used to going to different classrooms for classes. Like I had 1 year of that under my belt. No real worries to speak of, right? I mean, looking in hindsight, like as a 14-year-old, what issues do you really have to deal with? And just the freedom that you get as you grow into teenage years, right? And where you're not necessarily, you don't have to be watched all the time. You get left home. You can either watching over your other siblings or you get left home alone. Like there's some freedoms that come with that age group. And I remember fondly my 8th grade year, like probably one of the best teenage years that I recall. No girl problems, right? At that age, it was just either a lot of girls maybe you liked, but it's like I didn't really have any emotional trauma yet at that point. It was fun. School was okay. You got to play sports. I mean, summers were swimming and playing basketball and Mario, what a great life, right? And so I look back at some of those teenage years and be like, man, it was awesome being a teenager. I do remember some of the difficult times. I remember the times I got in trouble, for my parents, some of the big ones where I got grounded and where I really did stupid stuff. Looking back going, it wasn't really that big of a deal, but I could see how my parents were helping me in those times and trying to teach me and help me learn. And so looking at the teenage years, a lot of things happen. A lot of development happens. A lot of personality develops. A lot of, you start to experience things. You're still kind of a kid, but you also are starting to understand things logically as an adult. And it's a transition time, and it's difficult, but it also can be a lot of fun. And so as parents, as our kids grow to that age and they start to become that age, we want to help them get through that time, right? We want to help them get through the times that, you always hear people say, oh, just wait until they become teenagers, right? And it's always the older crotchety moms and dads, oh, you just wait. And like it's a threat, like you just wait till they're teenagers. You won't love them anymore. Like that's what they're implying. It's like, why are you trying to scare me for when they become 14? All of a sudden they become 13-year-olds or just a different person. Like my dad has said this about my sister, right? He would say, oh yeah, talking about Madison, just wait till she becomes a teenager. I'm like, okay. He's like, yeah, your sister, one day she loved me. The next day I was the worst thing on the planet. I'm like, that sounds like a you problem, not a her problem, but like those types of statements, you just, as with parents with littler kids or kids that are growing up through grade school, you're just like, oh no, what's coming? What's going to happen? You remember yourself as a teenager. You're like, I was fine. I was a good teenager, maybe rose-tinted glasses there, but teenagers it's part of life, and God loves teenagers. God loves grade schoolers. God loves everybody. But that time of life, God designed the way we grow and the way our brains develop and physically we change intentionally, right? It's none of it's accidental. So knowing teenagers and that they have kind of a bad rap sometimes, unfairly and sometimes justly deserved. But us as adults can have the same issues and if not worse issues as teenagers do and cause problems ourselves. So as we go through this and just thinking about when your child is a teenager, that's what I want you to think about. If you have young kids, and I know it's hard to think, but if you got anybody under the age of 5, Add 10 to 12 years and you're approaching teenage years, and 10 years goes by quickly. You can think back 10 years from now where you were 10 years ago. It was 2016, right? That's like, I can remember a lot of things from 2016. That's 10 years. So it won't be long, and your kids will be older. So we'll go to 1 Timothy chapter 4, verse number 12. This is Paul writing to Timothy, and obviously Timothy here is going to be a pastor, and there's a different connotation to him specifically, but this applies to our teenagers. It says, "Let no man despise thy youth, but be thou an example of the believers in word and conversation, in charity, in spirit, in faith, in purity." So as we think about our young people, and this verse will be taught and preached to youth conferences and youth groups and things like that, and it definitely applies to our youth group. We want them to be a good example, and they can be an example to us in their love for the Lord, their enthusiasm. As we become adults, sometimes we kind of lose some of that zeal, and it's good to see that energy and that zeal from young people so they can be an example to us there. But teenagers have done some incredible things even in this world. Louis Braille, I was hoping James would be here today. Louis Braille, who invented or presented a compact tactile method to read for the blind, the Braille, did that when he was 15. Like, there was a system that existed, but he put together the dots in the compacted way to read the words when he was 15 years old, and he was visually impaired. Jack Lucas of the Marine Corps, PFC Jack Lucas, earned the Medal of Honor 5 days after his 17th birthday in Iwo Jima. Right? He had been a Marine for 3 years already. Right? Probably lied about his age to get into the Marine Corps, but ended up in Japan, earned the Medal of Honor at 17 years old. Pele, any football fans here? Pele scored 6 goals in 4 games in the 1958 World Cup at age 17. Right? I mean, talent, right? But 17 years old. John D. Rockefeller, one of the richest men that ever lived, began his first company when he was 19. Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak first began working on Apple computers when they were 19. Right? There have been some incredible accomplishments by teenagers in America, in the world, and just because they're considered teenagers did not make them incapable of doing some pretty amazing and pretty great things. And can Christian teenagers be able to do great things for God even today? And, we have this view of teenagers, especially as our culture is shifting, and we see the young people being less mature and having a lot of questions. And we talked about gender studies or gender ideas a week or two ago. We can see a lot of confusion in our teenagers. And, we could take a step back and say, obviously, the devil is just attacking that age group. If the devil can go after and get children, when those children grow up and they are void of God and void of understanding, those adults are easier to mold and easier to mold away from God. And that is so the devil tries to get the kids and the teenagers. It's not a surprise. So as our kids in our homes, as we grow them to become teenagers as they age, there's a lot of potential there. There are things that our teenagers should be able to do and can do with God's help that hopefully surpass even what we did as teenagers, right? Hopefully, at least I always hope that my kids will be more mature than I was, right, when I was 17, 18 years old. I just hope that they get things quicker, right, that they succeed maybe in areas that I failed in. That's my hope and my desire for them. So there is a lot of potential in the teenage years. And yeah, the comment, just wait till they become teenagers, can be used to cause dread in parents of young children. And I think it's unfair. I don't think it's the right way to view that age group, especially of your own children, to be afraid of what that's going to come. Yes, the teenage years do have specific issues that are unique for that age group. There's a lot of things you go through as a teenager. And again, you can remember your time, but it's also an exciting time, right? These children are starting to grow where you can have conversations with them. Right, their logic begins to develop. You can have an adult conversation with teenagers that you can't have with a 6-year-old. Right, their brain starts to develop. You start to see little people become big people, and it's an opportunity, and there's a lot of potential there. So as parents, we need to make sure that we're dreading the teen years or just ready for a fight the minute they turn 13, but we're there to help them. Right, we're there to help them through those times, not to despise it or to dread it. That's not the attitude we want to have. And that's going to start when they're younger, right? As they start to grow, not looking like, oh man, it's going to be a terrible 10 years or a terrible 5 years once they become teenagers. Don't be afraid of it. Don't be scared of it. Be excited about what the potential is there. It's a time where we can help develop them to become who God intends them to be. Like, you think back to your teenage years, and there's probably some good memories and probably some bad memories. Probably some regrets you have, probably some things you wish had gone differently. Regardless of where you were or what you did or didn't do, the children that are growing up in your home now, you have the opportunity to help them reach the potential that God has for them. To maybe be better than you were as teenagers. To maybe make some mistakes. Most likely, yes, make some mistakes. But then have a mom and dad who are there to help them through those things. Maybe your parents did it. Maybe your parents didn't help you through the difficult times. Maybe you were kind of off on your own and you had to figure it out as you went. That's tough. And that's hard. And we, as Christian parents that have kids in our homes now, we don't want to repeat some of maybe the same mistakes your parents had with you. We have the opportunity to do better, to point them to the Lord, to help them through those things. So there are some potential things that teenagers have that we want to look at. One of the biggest, or one of the first things that we have, they have a potential for great faith. Regardless, again, maybe you came from a Christian home, maybe you didn't come from a Christian home. Maybe your parents got saved when you were a teenager. Maybe they aren't saved. Maybe you got saved as an adult. And so the Christian home is not how your background was. Now that you are a Christian, now that you are saved, now that you have children in your home, you have an opportunity to help your children's faith develop maybe way earlier than you even knew Jesus. And what an opportunity and potential that they have. When it comes to faith, their inexperience as a teenager is a benefit, right? They haven't lived long enough to know what's impossible, right? They haven't lived long enough to know that, oh, God can't do that, or be jaded about what God can do or what God can't do, right? And that's where some of that zeal comes in the youth group, and the teenagers just, they believe, they have that faith. And until the time where probably some adult jades them with that and brings them down or gives them some bad information, right? Hopefully we put them in a situation that doesn't happen, but it does happen. So they still believe God can do great and mighty things as young people. I mean, you go to any of these classrooms down here and you talk about what God can do, they will believe you, right? You go to these fourth graders who are 9 and 10 years old and you tell them that God did all these things and God can do this stuff in your life, they believe you 100%. They believe that God can, right? And as they grow into that teenage years, they still believe God can do great things, right? We look at David, right? David was a young shepherd. He was a teenager and he had great faith, right? Just doing what God wanted him to do. He had faith great enough as a teenager to be so confident that he could defeat a giant, a literal giant, because he believed in God. He had faith that God was who he said he was. Many around David, including his own brothers, look at David's inadequacies, looked at the things that he couldn't do because of who he was, right? He had people around him that did not believe strongly as he did that God was capable. They thought he was selfish. They thought he was just there to see the battle. David didn't care about that. David cared about God's name. And so even as a teenager like David, and we have it, we know David's life story, right? We know it in and out. We know the story of David and Goliath. But when you put it in real world scenario for us, they'd be taking any of those teenagers out of the youth group and saying to go against an army and bring down their number one warrior. That age group did that. So our teenagers are capable of doing things and trusting in God. David's trusted in God's power, and we still talk about that faith today as a teenager, right? So we as parents need to help build, right? Not tear down or discourage the faith of those young people. And let's be honest, when we get discouraged sometimes in our lives with our faith and doubting our faith, or maybe not as strong as our faith can be or should be, that is going to translate to our children, right? When they're little, we might be like, oh, they don't know. And they probably don't have an idea necessarily of what's going on. They don't know if you're struggling financially. They don't know if you're struggling in areas. They just know mom and dad do everything for them, and that's their security. But as they grow into teenagers, they start to feel some of those things. They start to see some of those things. They see where mom and dad struggle. And it's okay for you to struggle as mom and dad. There's nothing wrong with that. But you do have to realize that your lack of faith, or where you struggle in areas spiritually, that could translate to your children. If you doubt, if you don't have the faith that God can take care of you, if you don't have the faith in those areas spiritually, they're not going to believe it either. because they're going to see mom and dad. That's how they operate. And how you operate is their childhood. How their childhood is, it impacts who they become. And so it makes us need to be more reliant on the Lord, not just for our sakes, right? We need to do it for us, but sometimes it's hard to even do it for us. So we need not to just do it for us, we need to do it for our children. And thereby, if you want to go way down the road, our children's children. Right? Our faith or lack thereof, our resilience, our looking to the Lord versus looking to us will impact our kids. It'll impact our kids' kids. It's a generational thing. So as you have little ones that aren't even teenagers yet coming up in your home, be resilient, be resolved to have faith in the Lord even in the tough times, especially in the tough times. Help build their faith, not tear it down. Help them to trust and have faith that God can do what he says he's going to do. Right? And then we'll talk about it in a minute, but that goes back to making sure you have a walk with the Lord on your own. Making sure that you and God are good, that you know him, that you're walking with him, you're talking with him, you have a relationship with him, so that way that can translate to your children as they begin to have a walk with him themselves. Right? And we'll talk about that too. As teenagers grow, it's not just mom and dad's faith that want them to take, we want them to get their own. We want them to know the Lord for themselves. So they have a potential for great faith. They also have a potential for keen purpose. So they have the ability, and this is an exciting thing about teenagers too, they have the ability to make godly decisions that will shape their entire adult life. Right? The potential is still there. They have not made the big mistakes. Right? Not to say that they won't, but at this point, they have not gotten to the point where they've done something that is something they're going to have to overcome, or hurdle that they're going to have to overcome. They've got their entire adult life in front of them, right? And as they become teenagers, they're just a fun time of their life in your home still to develop. And the potential to make choices and decisions and develop a mindset that will set their trajectory as they become 20s, 30s, and become where you are now, right? They have that potential. Just in front of them, the potential for positive choices and direction is at an all-time high, right? There's no other time in their life will they have the biggest potential to make the right choices and the correct decisions. There will be other times to make right decisions, but this is where they become who they are going to be, right? I mean, you think back to your teenage years and some of the decisions and choices you made, even just in how you treat adults. How respectful you were or weren't. I mean, you knew the kids that had problems with authority, and you knew if you were one of them or not, right? And maybe if you were one of those kids, you've changed, hopefully, and you don't have that problem with authority anymore. But they have the potential to make the right choices. Daniel purposed in his heart, right? He made those decisions as a teenager whose parents most likely were murdered, house burnt down, taken from his home and brought to a foreign land, and forced to be a prisoner and live in a place where they didn't believe his God. They didn't do anything the way he did it. But he decided in the most difficult of situations to still follow God, to still trust him and not defile himself with all the opportunities that were there. Right? His choice early in life set a trajectory that allowed him to do much for God in his adult life. I mean, he's still part of the government as an 80, 90-year-old man because of the decisions he made as a teenager. The decisions he made as a teenager set his trajectory and made him become who he eventually was. And it all relied upon the Lord. So our children at that time, as teenagers, as pre-teenagers, wherever that starts, wherever that age group delineation is, that's when they start to make those decisions. And that's what we as parents are there for, is to help them have purpose. Right? Without purpose decisions that set purpose living, teenagers can make a mistake very early in their life, which a lot of teenagers do, waste time. Right? Without purpose, without a purpose, making decisions that set a purpose for a purpose living, teenagers can just make the mistake of just wasting their teenage years. And we as parents can allow that to happen in our own homes if we just let them kind of float along without any decision making, without any choices, just kind of be. And we do them a disservice if we don't prepare them for the life that's coming. They don't know how to. They don't have to know the course of their entire career or their life at 15, right? They don't have to know what they're going to be. They don't have to know where they're going to go for college and where they're going to live. But they should have made purpose decisions to follow God, right, to set their life in godly pursuits, right? And all 14, 15-year-olds have dreams of what they want to do or who they want to become. We as parents are responsible for making sure those dreams and decisions and even those maybe aspirations they have consider God, right? If it's, I just want to be good push, Dallas. That was, you didn't hear it maybe, but there was a good over there.
There's a good one.
It's really good. He's happy. That's what it means. But if our kids want to be baseball stars or basketball stars, right? There's nothing necessarily wrong in and of itself being an athlete. But what is God considered? Right? Is God's desire for their life considered in those dreams and those aspirations? As parents, those are the things we want to bring to the table for them. There's nothing wrong with them loving baseball and wanting to do good in baseball. The percentages, chance of them actually making it are super low. So keep that in mind as parents and make sure that God is considered in everything that they even dream to do. That's what our opportunity is as parents, right? Help your kids to understand. Where are we here? Okay. There. Help your kids to, as they grow, to consciously understand choices they make to follow God are important. Right? So when they make decisions at church, at camp, at youth con, you should know those as mom and dad. So as your kids grow and they go to these places, they go to these spiritual events, camps, youth cons, wherever they are, and they make decisions for the Lord. When they go down to the altar, here even at church, ask them, what did you decide? What did you say to God? What happened? Don't just let it be. Not just so that you can grill them and make sure they do what they said, but so you can support them, so you can help them. That's why we have Camp Accountability Night. That is Brother Samuel trying to help us as parents keep those decisions that they're making for the Lord as important. So when they make decisions for God, that should be a big deal. And we as parents need to enforce those things and help them know that they're consciously making decisions for God, and that is God appreciates that, and that will help them in their life. So help guide them to those decisions that become principles based on how they live as they grow. Right? The decisions they make now can become their principles by how they live their life. I mean, I don't want to overstate it as how dramatic it is, but it's a pretty big deal. The decisions they make as teenagers can determine the trajectory. So while we do have potential, we also do have pitfalls, right? I don't know why the title didn't come up first, but that's okay. So as much as there is potential for good in the teen years, there's also great potential for mistakes, right? There are vulnerabilities and temptations that are more acute through the teen years than in childhood, for sure, right? As their mind develops, as their body develops, as things change, as their friendships change, as influences come from a lot of different areas, as they grow, there's potential. There's temptations, and there's vulnerabilities that teenagers have as they just aren't as experienced. And they don't necessarily understand or see the entire picture. So those times they can be vulnerable. They can be scary, right? The temptations of the teen years do not come without the grace, though, to successfully navigate them. So there are opportunities for big mistakes to be made. But God is faithful. God is able, right, to help them and us as parents, help them successfully navigate through those things. 1 John 2:14 says, I have written unto you fathers, because ye have known him that is from the beginning. I have written unto you young men, because ye are strong, and the word of God abideth in you, and ye have overcome the wicked one. God gives us the ability to overcome the temptations. As adults, that applies, right? He's written to us fathers. We know we can overcome those things. And the young men, with God's help, with their parents' help, they can overcome those temptations. They don't have to become what you would call or consider a typical teenager that's rebellious, talks back to authority, trying to get into trouble, trying to do the things they're not supposed to do it just because they're not supposed to do it. Teenagers don't have to be that way, right? They don't have to be on meth carjacking people. That doesn't have to be the way teenagers are, right? They can do great and amazing things. And that is us as parents and God, obviously, to help them avoid those pitfalls. And I mean, there are a lot of mistakes made with those teenagers before that night, right, where they made a really bad mistake. There are a lot of choices, a lot of decisions that led them down that path. And not to say when your teenager messes up that that's where they're going to end up, right? God has grace to overcome and learn from mistakes. I mean, we're all living testimony to that. When mistakes are made, we can still overcome them and still live for God, right? But we want them to avoid even those mistakes. So there's a few ways that we can help them avoid those mistakes. The reasons why those mistakes come, I guess, depends on how you look at it. The biggest reason mistakes happen as teenagers is because they don't have an actual relationship with the Lord. And that's one of the reasons why we as adults have to make mistakes and panic and fear and all the things that are negative. One of the biggest reasons we lack a strong relationship with the Lord, right? This is especially dangerous to our church kids, to the kids that grow up here. What a blessing and a benefit they have and an opportunity and a leg up to be brought up in church. But it also can be a detriment if we're not careful, because it can just be how life is. Church is church, like God is God, and that's just how it is, but He's not real to them, right? And so as they are in their grade school years, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, leading up to teenage years, obviously we talked about this before. Salvation's the number one most important decision we want them to make. Pray for your little ones right now that as soon as they're capable of understanding that they make that choice, that their heart is soft for God and their need for Him and understanding for Him. But then as they grow, they can know the things of God, right? From Sunday school to VBS, youth conference, youth revivals. I mean, they're exposed to a lot of God, to a lot of preaching, a lot of teaching. But they can know it all, but not live it in experience. It could just be how their environment is, but not necessarily how their heart is. And obviously, we want to get to their heart. Once your child is saved, the expectation is that they grow spiritually, even as children. Right, we want them to grow spiritually, right? If they never learn how to really talk with God or listen to Him, spend time with Him in prayer, or have a real walk with Him, there will not be spiritual growth, right? If they're just relying on mom and dad, whether it's devotions or things of, praying before meals or praying as a family or church or Sunday school, and they're just relying on those things, which are all good, but not doing it of their own accord, they don't develop that relationship, even as children. So our job as parents is to help them with that relationship, is to introduce them to God, just like you'd introduce them to another person, a friend of theirs, or another adult. This is God. This is how we talk to Him. And you have that conversation with them, especially as teenagers, as they get to that age group. This is how you talk to God on your own. Make sure you take time to spend time with the Lord. Read your Bible on your own accord. Give them a time. Help them select a time, because if we don't, they won't. I mean, how hard is it for us to make sure that we hit the time that we're supposed to do to spend time with the Lord and read our Bible and pray? We struggle sometimes to make sure that we do it as responsible adults, right? Your teenager is going to struggle. So help them find a time, make it easy for them to do it, and help them through that. Right? Maybe spend some time with them as they pray, as they read, right? The first few times. But help them to know God on their own, not just because He's your God, but because He's their God. Once they reach young adulthood, this is a problem a lot of times too. Many flounder and fall back instead of continuing to grow because He didn't become real to them. Right? If they're just doing it because mom and dad did it all the way through their life, as soon as they're out of the house and God's not real to them, why would they continue that path? They were never actually on the path. They were just on your coattails. And as soon as they jump off your coattails, there's a lot of different directions they can go. Doesn't mean they're automatically going to go into sin and evil, but it just means they aren't going to continue to grow spiritually at the best. And we want to help them the goal is when they leave your house, whether it's to start a career, start their own family, start their own home, you want them to go on the trajectory that they continue to grow spiritually, and now to develop their own home to do the exact same thing, to replicate hopefully what you're doing in your home. But that's going to require us as parents for it to be real, for it to be important. And that's why it's so vital that you have a walk with the Lord. It's not just pastors and the church and superficial, but it's real to you in the areas that nobody else sees, not even your spouse. In the times and the moments where it's just you and God, that those moments are real, and those moments happen, right? It's not the ones that everyone else sees that's important. It is important, but the most important, the most vital is the ones that nobody sees. Is the communications with your God that is just you, the time with Him that is just you. Your spouse is not there. There's no teachers. There's no friends. There's nobody else around. There's nobody in those conversations but you and your God. If you're going to struggle with those things. I struggle with that. We all do, right? To make those times important, to make those times priority. But if we struggle with those things, but then we expect our kids to figure it out and get it when we aren't even getting it, that's hard. It's tough for them to do that. So you got to make sure you're on top of it. You got to make sure you're on top of yourself. And then you can translate that to them and you can help them. They're going to need your help. Maybe you didn't have that help from your parents. Well, they have you. Now you can help them. So be that parent that maybe you kind of hoped that your parents had been. And not to say, well, they didn't help me, so they're terrible parents. We all make mistakes. Our parents made mistakes, shortcomings, right? But there are a lot of great things they did too. We have an opportunity to help our teenagers to know God. It sets them up with such better opportunities to go down the right path when they do leave your home. They're going to have their own trials come their way. You know that, right? Like they're going to have trials when they get out of your home that, remember the trials you faced that nobody else knew about, that you had to get through with you and God and your spouse, those are going to come for them. Don't you want them to have God to lean on? Don't you want them to be able to say they can turn to God and that's going to help them get through that? That's what we want. And so it starts when they're kids. It starts when they're the age of all these junior church kids that are just dying to come in this room right now. It's laying the groundwork of the foundation then, so when they go to the teen group and their logic improves and they can understand it's the next step and they begin to build on that foundation. So that way down the road, even further, when they're out of the house, they know God. And when the tough time comes where mom and dad can't help them, they can only pray for them. They can look to God and be sustained and help through those times. But it starts when they're that age. So we'll stop here. We'll finish up. I got plenty to get us through a whole nother lesson. Whether that's good or bad, I guess that's your perspective. Don't tell me what you think, unless it's good. So we'll start there next week. Hopefully it's a help to you. I know